Well, the Minister of Information Culture, Mr. Lai Mohammed, says the federal government has implemented more than 150 ease of doing business reforms across the country. The minister said one of the reforms, including the signing of the Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, KAMA 2020, by President Muhammadu Buhari, which introduced at least 15 new provisions that promotes ease of doing business and reduce regulatory hurdles in the country. Mr. Mohammed disclosed this in Lagos while describing the reforms as the brainchild of the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. Let's talk more about this and, of course, the ease of doing business amid government's plan to remove subsidy, that's petrol subsidy. I'm being joined by an economic and investment strategist, Mr. Ayorinde Akinloye. Mr. Akinloye, thank you so much for being on the program. It's good to have you join us. Mr. Ayo, can you hear me? I cannot hear you.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Good. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Now, let's start with the ratings from the World Bank, looking at the ease of doing business figures that was presented to us. We see Nigeria not doing very well. I think about 131, that's where we ranked out of 190 countries, if I'm correct. First is, with all of these efforts being claimed by the federal ministry and, of course, PEBEC, saying that a lot has been done with regards to the ease of doing business initiative in the country. Why are we still here? What are the challenges you identify?
Well, in terms of ease of doing business within the country, we definitely know that we haven't. Yes, we in the early days of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, I think in 2016, 2017, we recorded that jump, that significant jump, about multiple places, about 30, 40 places up on the rankings. And it was down to a few reforms that were announced, particularly around securing permits and also around registering a business or registering a business name and things like that. So those are just few things that are done. But generally, in terms of ease of doing business within the country, when as a business person, when you want to start a business, you look at all the hurdles you have to face for you to, number one, to start the business, number two, to run the business, and even apart from running the business, to even run the business profitably. There are quite lots of challenges, and we can begin to pick them one after the other. And I think that a lot of effort has not been put in place to sort of remedy these challenges, and we can pick them. So first, we look at the aspect of business infrastructure. Last week, there was a conversation going on around how Benue has a lot of, they're known for producing a lot of mangoes, yet we are not able to make use, there are not people willing to establish businesses around that production of mangoes in Benue State, particularly in terms of creating processing factories to process the raw products into, more processed forms for exports to other countries where they are used to produce things like juice and other consumables, And the problems around that is, one, you have issue of transportation. So that is speaking to the infrastructure part. You have issues around transportation. So when you harvest products, even down to other agricultural produce that we have in the country, cocoa, yam, consumables like tomatoes, pepper, the problem is when you're producing on the farm, for you to, the routes to market, the transport facilities for you to move it from the market down, from the farm to the market, are very much archaic and decrepit. So what you face is, before your goods get to the market, more than half of them have become waste. In the case of exporting, by the time we are exporting, it takes roughly between 40 to 60 days for you to be able to clear a truckload of maybe cocoa or yam. It takes roughly between 40 to 60 days, depending on who you're asking. And in some cases, even extends way more than that. So by the time your commodity is getting out of the country, the quality has gone down, and as a result, we don't meet the standard of what is required outside the country, in Europe and in Asia and other key countries where we export these produces to. So that's just one aspect of infrastructure. You also have the aspect of storage. So we produce a lot of these commodities, and we have the potential to even produce way more than we currently produce. But the problem is, as a business owner, as an investor, I don't want to invest in producing those products. I don't want to invest in that potential because we don't have the capability to consume everything at once. And then there's also the problem of being able to export it. So I would need to have quality storage facilities for me to store those kind of perishable commodities that I know I need to store for a long period of time before they're able to go to the market. But these kind of facilities are not there, and these are just aspects of infrastructure. If we go to the side of policy making, there's also the aspect of policies. We begin to talk about, what policies are is the government putting in place in order to reduce the bureaucracy around getting permits. For example, you want to start a business, you have to go to acquire permits to even to run something as small as a bottled water or a water making factory, bottled water or a pure water making factory. The permits you need for you to get from NAFDAC, Standard Organization of Nigeria, there are quite lots of bureaucracies around this part. And there's also the part of, officials in some of these organizations wanting you to go through the back door in order for you to hasten the.
Well, we'll see. We'll reconnect with Ayo. Obviously, I'm sure that we'll get him back very shortly. They're speaking around.
There's also the topic of the market. There's also the topic of the market. When you look at the Nigerian market today, yes, we have a very large market. We say we have roughly over 200 million people living in Nigeria. But more than half of that market, they are multidimensionally poor. We're having close to about 60% of the population are multidimensionally poor. How would they be able to afford some of these commodities? So as a business owner, you produce, you invest a lot, you take loans to import machineries, to build facilities, to produce goods and services to the Nigerian market. But the market itself is not even able to afford the commodities you are producing because they don't have the income level to patronize and to buy these items. So these are all issues from the aspect of policy making, down to the infrastructure part of things, down to even the market in which you want to sell goods to. When you combine everything together, it definitely makes it a torrid experience for you to run a business in Nigeria. And those are all issues that needs to be looked into in order to alleviate those concerns for investors and business owners.
I like that, Ayo. You were able to really break into it and, talk about some of the factors responsible for this interesting stuff. But I want to ask you that the ministries and departments and agencies of government have a clear role to play in actualizing this initiative. How well would you say they are cooperated or they have cooperated with the federal government in achieving the ease of doing business initiative of government?
Yes, so that's definitely a big part, which is something I sort of alluded to under the policymaking aspect. So it's one thing to create laws, it's one thing to sign legislation, like you mentioned earlier. The president gave his accent to the latest amendment of the Kama bill. All these adjustments, legislations can come into play, and and then they are officially signed there. But it is one thing to cause change within the ministries, departments, and agencies that are responsible for implementing these new legislations that are being passed by the government and the legislature. So there's a need to work on implementing those policies, because one thing that is very common to the MDAs as we know them is there's always that difficulty to adapt, to adopt change. So when there's a change in legislation, when there are policies that are being passed to sort of ease the concerns and the policy making aspect of business owners or business investors, these ministries, these departments, these agencies find it difficult to adapt to these new policies and actually implement them. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of implementing those policies, and it boils down to leadership. So the federal government and state governments at different levels need to hold the leaders of these government agencies. They need to hold them. They need to hold them responsible for implementation and driving a culture of change and agility within their ministries and agencies. So as these new legislations are coming on board, as they are being announced and being signed by the government, the leaders of the different agencies responsible for implementing these policies must be held responsible for giving updates, providing regular updates, providing regular accountability sessions with these ministries, with these departments are needed. Let them provide updates on how well they have gone in terms of implementing these policies, because these are not fiscal infrastructure structure and things that you can see where you can say, oh, this project is at so completion level. It is a matter of implementing the processes, adjusting the processes, and how they are able to disburse these processes to different people that want to register businesses in one case, or get permits to be able to run a particular business, or even in the process of getting lands. That's even a different conversation entirely in terms of the Land Use Act and how all issues around that is also affecting businesses. So there's need for the federal government. Yes, they are putting policies in place and announcing new legislation, but that is not enough. When you announce the legislation, hold the agencies responsible for implementing these legislations, hold them responsible in ensuring that they are being implemented, and we are seeing the direct impact on the business environment within the country.
Interesting stuff. And as we move to a deregulated oil and gas market, and everyone is talking about it, you will agree with me that subsidy is now a discussion everywhere, and everyone is talking about. Now, let me ask the question this way. What do you think would be the impact of subsidy removal on small businesses operating in the country?
Definitely, it's straight away off the bat. We definitely know it's going to have a significant, a negative impact on a lot of small businesses. Yes, again, the issue of subsidy, I know we're not here to discuss either it's right for the government to remove subsidy or not to remove it, because that's an entire different conversation. But definitely we know that the government is caught between a rock and a hard place. It's basically picking between the devil and the deep blue sea, because the government cannot continue to borrow to fund for consumption within the country, because particularly when you look at the fact that our crude oil production is no longer as it used to be. But at the same time, by removing fuel subsidy, not only are you impoverishing the populace in terms of the citizens and on an individual level, you are also creating a significant problem for small businesses. Yes, admittedly, quite a number of medium-scale businesses probably use diesel rather than petrol in running their businesses and their day-to-day activities. But the truth is, they are small-scale businesses. For example, you're talking about the barbers, small restaurants that are not as big as the large chain restaurants, smaller businesses of this nature still rely significantly on the use of petrol to run their businesses, to power their operations. And even for companies that use diesel power generators, they still have petrol power generators as substitutes, just in case their generators, the main power source goes down for a while and things like that. Beyond that, they also use petrol powered vehicles to transport these goods and services from wherever for those that involve transporting their goods to the market. Not every one of them use diesel powered vehicles to transport their goods. So this is going to have a wide-ranging impact, because and it's going to be very, very negative. What we're likely going to see is a situation whereby a lot of businesses would, number one, have to increase prices immediately. The moment we see removal of fuel subsidy, they have to increase prices. And in increasing prices, when we're talking about these price increments, we're not talking about increasing prices by maybe 5% or 10%. We're talking about cases where prices would increase by 50%. In some cases where it's a significant cost of running the business, prices will probably increase, probably double of some commodities. And what you're likely going to see is consumers would cut down their consumption of those commodities. Revenue will be affected. A lot of production capacity would be lost, because all these small businesses will have to cut back on the scale of services and the scale of production that they would typically do in order to sort of reduce wastage. So these are all issues that are going to arise. And as a result of that, you would see that because consumer demand is going to wane, some businesses might just have to pack up because they can't continue to run the business at such high cost levels. You're likely going to see businesses pack up. That's going to have ripple negative effect on level of employment within the country, and that affects poverty levels, affects consumer income, and it's that vicious cycle of poverty all over again. So the country is too poor for us to face removal of fuel subsidy right now. But at the same time, the government is too poor to continue to fund subsidy payments. We are basically going to be paying the price of years of mismanagement of the economy and resources, and that is what we are likely going to see play out once fuel subsidy is removed, because no amount of palliatives, and giving people monthly palliatives and all would sort of temper the effect. So basically, it's just going to be a vicious cycle of poverty all over again for businesses, small businesses, down to the people that they employ, down to the consumers, and it goes on and on until somehow we're able to break that circle by making the necessary investments and putting necessary policies in place, which I know we have discussed multiple times here on the program.
I see that this is a necessary evil that we must really address. I'd like to just be a realist here. I'm looking at what our inflation figures would show at that point, because when we consider a hike in energy prices, a hike in aviation prices, and all that we already face at the moment. So what sort of figures would we be seeing, just like a projection on one side? And will this not in totality affect that inclusive growth that we've much talked about? Well, I don't want us to really, because like you said, if we stay so much on subsidy discussion, we could spend the whole day. But are you not one of those that are talking about addressing the corruption in that space, in the downstream, before this is totally removed?
Yes, so I think, like you mentioned, I think the first key thing, right? If for example, I mean, it's a tough decision. It's a place where I probably don't want to be the one making that decision, whereby maybe you're deciding to remove fuel subsidy or not to remove it at this current junction where we are in the Nigerian economy. Maybe 5 years ago, 7 years ago, it was easier to say, let's remove fuel subsidy. At that point, the impact would not have been as harsh as it would be today, because the currency is now much devalued. Because the reality is the price of a barrel of the price of a keg or a gallon of PMS today is still roughly around $1.10. But the problem is our currency has devalued significantly over the past 7 years. So in Naira terms, it has become more expensive to subsidize PMS and to even buy PMS. So the problem now is something we could have done 5, 6, 7 years ago and done away with, and we'll probably have begun to reap the benefits of it today, is something we are now going to be doing at a much more difficult level. But the first thing, if I was to sort of be the chairman of a committee saying we want to remove fuel subsidy, or we want to reach a conclusion either we should remove it or not, the first thing that we need to do is to sanitize the whole process around the downstream oil and gas sector. The truth is, the amount we spend on subsidy is not actually going. The Nigerians are not enjoying the full benefits. We have issues around when the subsidized petrol is being imported into the country. We see issues of it being diverted and smuggled to neighboring countries where they are sold for higher prices. So, for example, they say we consume maybe 60 million liters of petrol in Nigeria daily. But when we sanitize the system and we look deep into what we actually consume, we're probably consuming maybe less. Maybe there's about 20-30% of that is not consumed in Nigeria. And the moment you take that out of the bucket, it makes it easier for the government to say, okay, if we are spending 5 trillion on subsidy today, if 20-30% of that is smuggled to other countries, and we're able to somehow sanitize the system, we are going to save ourselves another 1.5 to 2 trillion, and our subsidy cost will come down significantly. Now, the subsidy cost comes down significantly, and then you can now sit down at that point and take decision and say, oh, now that the subsidy cost has come down significantly by eliminating smuggling, can we actually continue to pay this subsidy until we are able to put in place measures that would make it easier for citizens to bear the cost of removing fuel subsidy, maybe over a period of time? Or do we gradually remove it and maybe reduce the subsidy spend by half, and then as a result, the impact will not be too much on the citizens, and at the same time, the government will have breathing room? So these are all issues that needs to be looked at. How can we end the issues of smuggling of subsidized PMS that comes into the country? And by doing that, I think the federal government would see that there would be a significant reduction in the subsidy burden that they're having to bear.
Ayo, indeed, we are going to have a date to discuss more around subsidy, because I see that you're loaded and there's a lot for you to tell Nigerians about this. Well, thank you so much. Ayo, this much time can take today. Despite the weather, we're able to get the best of the interview. I've been speaking to an economic and investment strategist, Ayorinde Akinloye. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your day at work.
Thank you very much, Tolu. It's always a pleasure.